Thank you for joining us. We launched this sustainability lecture and dialogue series last fall to feature UNCG researchers whose work address aspects of sustainability and to have dialogues around them. This is the 9th event of the series, and most of the past events are recorded and they are available on the Office of Sustainability website, so please check them out. Now, I'd like to briefly introduce the speakers who collaborate on research around sustainability that they share today. Dr. Jin Su is an associate professor at the Department of Consumer Apparel and Retail Studies. Her research interests include global supply chain management and global sourcing strategies in the textile, apparel, fashion, and retail industries, sustainability, and brand marketing. Dr. Su is also an active member of UNCG's Sustainability Council. Professor Ann Wood spent over 25 years in the apparel industry, holding positions in trend forecasting, fashion marketing, and product development for companies including Cotton Incorporated, Lane Bryant, Saks Department Store Group, and Cato Corporation. And Dr. Vidya Gargeya is a professor in the Department of Information Systems and Supply Chain Management in Bryant School of Business and Economics. He has been published in numerous industry journals and is a co-author of the book, Customer Relationship Management, A Global Perspective. Today, they will speak about sustainable entrepreneurship in the apparel industry. Please join me in welcoming the speakers.
It's probably the cue for me to start.
Jin, if you want to go ahead and share your slides.
Okay, I will share my slides.
Yeah. While Jin is doing that, I'm Vidya Gargeya, a professor in Information Systems and Supply Chain Management Department. And Jin and Ann are actually the drivers of this train, and I'm only the caboose. And I just get to do the interesting things that they ask me to do. Before I go into the formal presentation, I want to do an invocation that has been thousands of years old on sustainability, which goes like this. And I will certainly chant it in Sanskrit, the original, and then I will give you the meaning in English. Om Swasti Prajabhyah Paripalayantam Nyayena Margena Mahim Mahisha Go Brahmanebhyah Shubhamastu Nityam Loka Samastha Sukhino Bhavantu Kale Varshatu Parjanyaha Prithvi Sasya Shalini Deshoyam Chobarahito Brahmana Santu Nirbhaya Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Santu Niramaya Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhaga Bhavet Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityor Ma Amrutam Gamaya Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. And now I will read the meaning of what I just chanted. May there be happiness for all people. May the leaders righteously serve the earth. May there be welfare for animals and persons of wisdom at all times. May all beings be happy. May the clouds rain at the proper time. May the earth produce grains. May this earth be free from famine. May people of contemplation be fearless. May all be happy. May all enjoy health and freedom from disease. May all enjoy prosperity. May none suffer. The last part says, lead me by giving knowledge from the unreal to the real, from darkness of ignorance to light of knowledge, from the sense of limitation to limitlessness or liberation. Being at a university, I think the last one is also very useful for us. And today, the topic is on sustainable entrepreneurship in the apparel industry, passion and challenges. So how did we come together? And before I even say that, I can even do a little bit of presenting myself. I'm actually color coding our presentation. The pink or the slightly reddish color of my shirt indicates actually prosperity or the profit part of it, of sustainability. On my tie, it is blue stands for the planet, and the flags of the various countries represent the people. So sustainability relates to people, planet, and profit. And here, Jin and Anne came together, not only in terms of our research endeavor, but we also came together in our teaching endeavors too, because we are teaching courses that have infused sustainability in them. So that said, let me go on to the next slide, Jin. Here in the apparel industry, the US Census Bureau of 2020 indicates that 96.3% of the firms in the US apparel industry, in the US apparel industry, are small firms with less than 100 employees. So if we are studying this, we are studying a vast majority of that industry. And sustainable entrepreneurship has emerged as one of the most exciting and innovative phenomena in our industry. And we are going to present today some research that we are doing on this. Next slide, Jin. What is the purpose of our research? Because we have seen several of these entrepreneurs, what drives them? Because in fact, what are the drivers and what are the deterrents for these entrepreneurs? And what we found is that there are certain motivation or motivating factors that run these entrepreneurs in not only starting, but as we will show through the various case studies. In fact, one of the cases we are going to present actually started as early as 1977. That is more than 40 years ago, and that firm is continuing. So it is sustainable, not only sustainability in terms of the planet and the people, but financially being viable and sustainable, and that is important. And what we are also going to present is what are the challenges that these entrepreneurs, and it's going to be a study of 5 cases, and we are going to present the challenges they are facing and how they are tackling those. And next, Jin Su will provide a background about the research, a literature review. She will also talk about the research method, and Anne would round it up with the results, and I will come back up again as the caboose. So go ahead, Jin.
Thank you, Dr. Gagia. And I would like to first give you a little bit about the background of our studies. And we three, Dr. Gagia, Professor Wood, and me, we came up with this interesting topic, sustainable entrepreneurship, because we feel we did an extensive literature review and we found out the regular factors of entrepreneur motivation cannot accurately explain the motivational structure of sustainable entrepreneurship. because we all know that the motivation of the entrepreneurship, regular entrepreneurship, include like freedom, independent self-determination, and personal wealth, financial motivation. However, we find out for sustainable entrepreneurship, the motivational structure is different from regular entrepreneurship. So we are interested in specifically the sustainable entrepreneurship. And also we find out, and also in the apparel industry, in the global apparel industry, the dominance of the small business is very well known in this industry, especially in the US, and over 96% of the businesses in the US are categorized as a small business with less than 100 people there. So we are specifically interested in the small business owner's perspective. So in this study, we utilize sustainability theory, particularly 3 bottom line theory, and we also implement a qualitative research approach to explore the challenges and the motivations of sustainable apparel entrepreneurs. We first would like to introduce this concept of sustainable entrepreneurship. Sustainable entrepreneur is defined as individual who holistically integrates the goals of economic, social, and environmental entrepreneurship into an organization that is sustainable in its goal and sustainable in its form of wealth generation. So based on this, there are different types of definition of the sustainable entrepreneur. However, we feel like this definition comprehensively summarizes the sustainable entrepreneur perfectly. So sustainable entrepreneurs, they consider sustainable development as a unique business opportunities that help them transform the existing economy into a sustainable economy, creating solutions for various social and environmental aspects. So which means the sustainable entrepreneurs need not only exploit market opportunity, but also they transcend that, even going so far as to analyze more consciously environmental and social impacts. And so recognition of the entrepreneurship as a solution rather than a cause of environmental degradation and social inequality has moved the field to explore new form of purpose-driven entrepreneurship. And this is especially important for apparel business, specifically for small apparel business. A lot of small apparel business owners, they start their sustainable business. They are more purpose-driven business owners. They would like to solve the environmental and social issues. So that's a key features of sustainable small business apparel owners. And also, we specifically in this study, we are interested in to explore entrepreneur passion. We all know that entrepreneurship is a passionate process full of emotional energy, drive, spirit, because entrepreneurship generates substantial emotions due to the fact that there are a lot of various pressure, risks, and uncertainty. And also personal consequences are tied into the fate of the firm. So the small business owners, entrepreneurs, they are under huge pressure. So what motivates small business owners to be persevere and to be perseverant and drive their dreams for sustainable business. So we are interested to know this. And we find out passion is a driving force for sustainable entrepreneur. So the entrepreneur passion is defined as an entrepreneur's intense affective state accompanied by cognitive and behavioral manifestation of high personal value. So passion is an essential aspect of entrepreneurship. And specifically, we three researchers, we feel like passion is perfect for sustainable apparel entrepreneur. So we used this quote, sustainable apparel entrepreneur is a product of a reflexive relationship between one's core values and one's end product, which result in the affirmation of entrepreneur as sustainable entrepreneur. And as I have mentioned that in this study, we used the sustainability theories, the three bottom line theories, so people, planet, and profit. And so the three dimensions of the sustainability, including environmental dimension, social dimension, economic dimensions. And this figure illustrates all the detailed subdimensions within each of the three dimensions of sustainability. And also, I would like to give you a brief introduction about why we are interested in apparel industry, because apparel industry is a perfect example of the global supply chain. And because the apparel industry is global in nature, all the suppliers are widely spread across the globe, and due to the globalization and international trade. And we can see that apparel industry start from the very beginning, agriculture industry, chemical industry. So there are, it's very complicated process, including a lot of procedures, process, and all different types of people involved in this pipeline. And all sustainability is a big issue in the apparel industry, especially apparel fashion sector, apparel fashion retail industry. The fashion industry is widely believed to be the second most polluting industry in the world. The global apparel industry is extremely energy consuming, polluting, and wasteful. And in 2020, McKinsey, a consulting company, they did a survey, and their survey shows that respondents well recognized the concept of sustainability. The millennial generation, US millennial generation, millennial consumers, they think sustainability is both the single biggest challenge and the single biggest opportunity for the apparel industry and the retail industry. So it highlights the significant role of the sustainability in the global apparel industry. Here is an example. It takes around 7,500 liters of water to make a single pair of jeans, equivalent to the amount of water the average person drinks over a period of 7 years. So a lot of industry sectors like dyeing, finishing, printing, those industry sectors those industry sectors have a lot of issues related to the environmental sustainability and social sustainability. And there is a documentary film, River Blue. So if you are interested, you can actually take a look at this documentary film. This film explains how the denim industry causes some environmental issues. And so the apparel industry recognized the importance of the sustainability. So the whole industry and also the apparel consumers work together to promote sustainable apparel business. Sustainable apparel business is currently an emerging trend, innovative concept especially for small apparel business owners. And so we did this study particularly focused on the small business owners. So we utilized an inductive qualitative approach, and we use a purposive sample strategy. So after the IRB approval from the UNCG, we, as a research team, we interviewed 5 sustainable apparel entrepreneurs in the North Carolina. And those 5 sustainable apparel entrepreneurs, they are very willing to they were very willing to share their experience and experience with us. So we obtained a lot of information. Thematic analysis was used to identify the common themes. So next, Professor Wood will talk about the themes we identified through our interview with those 5 small apparel business owners.
Thank you, Dr. Su. So before I talk about the findings, I wanted to give you a little bit more information about the companies that we profiled. As you can see from the chart here, they were founded in different years. And as Dr. Gargea alluded to, we have one company that goes all the way back to 1977 that makes sustainable printed t-shirts. And I actually wanted to highlight that particular company because they're called TS Designs, and they have a very strong relationship with sustainability over a very long period of time. And they have a t-shirt I brought with me today that has a QR code, which I'm going to try to get up here to the camera so you can see the QR code on that t-shirt itself, where you can scan the QR code and find out everything about that supply chain, from the farmer who grew the cotton to the spinner to the production facility in North Carolina, all the way to the end. So that's really exciting. This sub-company of TS Designs is called Solid State. So if you're interested in that, they make some really fantastic t-shirts for men's and women's. So that's just one of the companies. We have several others. For example, Gaia Conceptions, which is B. They're based right here in Greensboro, and they make organic women's apparel. It's all made to order, and it's actually custom dyed with natural dyes. I've been to their facility, and it's very exciting to see. So and you can order online. And like I said, they only make to order. So once you place the order, it takes about 2 to 3 weeks for the garment to be cut and sewn. And they are just a fantastic small company. One other I want to highlight is participant C, and that is Old Mason Jar. They're based out of Charlotte, North Carolina, and they make custom men's clothing. They actually have a boutique, a retail store in the South End area of Charlotte. And they also have online sales as well as wholesale accounts. And I've worked with them since I wrote my thesis, and they've grown exponentially over the last few years. So it's a really exciting to see them continue a sustainable model and be very successful at it. So let's move on to the findings. Next slide. And we identified 4 themes related to passion that were elicited from all of the participants. And I'll just tell you the 4 and then kind of talk about a few quotations to give you a little bit more insight. So the first theme is the passion for what they're making and selling. Here, all of the participants were very, very proud of their sustainable business models. And they feel that they're responsible to the planet as well as responsible to their own creativity simultaneously. So that's really what drives the passion there. Theme 2 is passion for sustainable future for the planet and people. And here, all of the participants agreed that they engaged, whether they said it or not, they engaged in the triple bottom line of sustainability, which is, Dr. Gargea mentioned, people, planet, and profit. And so they felt that that was critical in running their businesses. And they're very much driven by an orientation grounded in those values. Theme 3 is a passion for building a strong local community. So here they all felt that they wanted to source and be as local as possible, as well as giving back to the community in terms of their business models. That was so crucial to all of them, but they did it in very different ways. And then theme 4 is overall a passion for changing the apparel industry. They really felt that they were at the forefront of change in how apparel businesses needed to be run. And so they were very passionate about that. So I want to share with you some of the different quotes. I'm not going to read all of them, but I just want to share you a couple of different quotes. So the passion for making, for what they're making and selling. I think next slide. Right, Jen? So I'm just going to read you one of the excerpts that I have, and that's: the sustainable business is something I can be proud of and I can be creative. During my time abroad, I came to understand why sustainable and slow fashion is so important. I saw the benefit that a fair wage can have on society, and I experienced firsthand the positive effects of manufacturing organic clothing. So it's really important that they understand how their whole supply chain is affecting everything, including society, as well as their bottom line. So that is really important. The next slide. Oh, there's the quote right there. So I apologize. We have a lot more quotes, so you can kind of go through. I didn't want to read all of these quotes. I just wanted to kind of focus in on a couple of them. And so passion for a sustainable future for the planet and people. I'm not sure if it's up here, but can you click to the next one, I guess? So the one that I wanted to share with you is working with, and here you see a couple of other ones. Working with sustainable materials creates security on multiple levels. It creates sustainable farming, jobs, healthier working conditions for all levels of production, and of course is better for the planet and all who live on it. So again, that passion shows through by trying to create that sustainable future for all people who live and breathe on this planet. So it's very, very exciting to hear these responses. So for theme 3, building a strong local community, the quotation I wanted to share was the first one here. North Carolina is a great place to start a fashion business. You can visit textile factories, dye houses, and sewing facilities, and you can meet people there, build a connection with the industry. I can also support my community. It's a good way to support local textile community, producers, local designers, and artists. So there was a very important web of connection that all of these sustainable apparel entrepreneurs felt for their communities and their local area. And then finally, the theme 4 is the passion for changing the apparel industry. And the quotation that I wanted to share was, I believe that sustainability includes 2 parts. It's not up here on the screen, but the way it is produced and the way it is consumed. To produce a garment ethically and sustainably is to be conscious of who is making the clothes and ensuring they are working in a healthy environment. It also means minimizing waste and choosing a low impact fabric. But the second part of sustainable fashion is how the garment is used by the consumer. A sustainable garment is one that is treasured and worn over and over, not one that is worn once and then sent to a landfill. So they're thinking about the entire circle of production, the circle of life of the garment, not just from the beginning till it gets sold, but how it is cared for after. And they feel that making a higher quality sustainable garment will help achieve that goal. And then I want to move to the challenges. So we found there were 3 themes with regard to the challenges. there were limited options. So there were a lack of dye houses, a lack of skilled workers. A lot of people mentioned that many skilled workers were retiring and there's just no one taking their place. There's absolutely a dearth of producers in the wholesale supply chain, which is another issue that was being faced by all of these sustainable entrepreneurs. And then price considerations. They all agreed and mentioned that there are extra costs associated with running a sustainable apparel businesses. And that's a very major obstacle for all of them to overcome. And I have a quotation to share with you on that in that regard. So one of the participants said, consumers, no matter what they say, if they're not willing to spend more money on that product, then we're limited in being able to continue producing it. So there was definitely a consensus there. And number 3 is the need to change the consumer's mindset. So here they're really thinking about educating the consumer because they feel it's very, very difficult to convince consumers that sustainable apparel is, number 1, it's fashionable, and number 2, that it should cost more because there's more quality inherent in the product and there's more craftsmanship in the process. For example, Gaia Conceptions, like I mentioned, they make everything by hand. They use only organic fabrics, which cost more money. They have seamstresses who work on site. They pay them a living wage, so they're not in a sweatshop environment making $2 a month. They're making a living wage here in North Carolina, and so their price is higher. So those are considerations that are hard to convince the consumer that is the reason why you need to pay a little bit more. So there's a very strong need to educate consumers in order to increase demand for sustainable apparel, and also to convince them that sustainable apparel can be very, very fashionable. And they were saying that ship is starting to turn, that people are starting to see sustainable apparel as more and more fashionable, with designers like Stella McCartney embracing the sustainable model and getting the word out there. So I believe we might have some more quotations. So these are some additional example of limited options. As I mentioned, the dye houses, but having options is one thing, but also having variation is another. A big piece of our business is making very specific things, and you're very limited where you can buy fabric, in our case, but the variation in fabric. This was, I believe, from Gaia Conceptions, because they have they believe that they want to have a strong local sourcing chain, but sometimes they have to order from overseas because they can't get the organic fabric domestically. So that's one of their struggles. And next, price considerations. Like I said, the biggest issue is price. You have a marketplace where 98% of the clothes you buy today are made overseas. Labor is cheaper overseas. Processes along the way to reduce the initial costs of making a product doesn't measure the negative external costs, which, in other words, the climate change of transporting garments all over the world, environmental impact of not having to follow water and air regulations like we do here in the United States, and paying a living wage. So these are considerations. This is from TS Designs. They pay their employees. I've actually been to their facility, which is fantastic. They even have a working garden where they have chickens and grow plants and all of that. They have beehives, and all of that is given back to the employees. Pretty amazing. So they believe in health care for their employees. So again, we live in this marketplace that only looks at the short-term costs and passes on the negative external costs to the next generation. And so they're trying to change that and educate the customer by explaining why that price matters. And this t-shirt is a good example of that. By showing the supply chain, showing where your money is going, really makes a difference. And then I think there's one more, changing the consumer's mindset. Again, this just gives you more examples about sustainable fashion in the past pushed people away from purchasing it because it wasn't fashionable. But companies like Patagonia, Stella McCartney, Reformation, Eileen Fisher are bringing back the idea that sustainability can be fashionable. So those are the findings that we had based on our qualitative research.
Okay, in conclusion, the caboose is here And I'm going to talk a little bit about what we found from this wonderful study. While the entrepreneurs are having the passion for caring for others or a particular social group, addressing environmental issues, or creating a more sustainable future, what we found was they are knowledgeable about the realities. They are not naive. They know how much of an uphill task it is. And we are pleased to report that while they are passionate, they know the realities on the ground. So their success is built on that. So it's not just coming in a year and saying this is what we are doing, but they are there in a sustainably a long way to be there. And the next slide, please. And here, what I would like to say is the sustainable entrepreneurs face a multiplicity of ecological, social, and economic factors, many factors they face. And these are challenges that address the traditional views for entrepreneurship. Because typically, the traditional view of entrepreneurship is have a good product, have an excellent and efficient process, and profit will come. You are both effective and you are efficient, and profit will come. But these entrepreneurs have to work with another set of 3 Ps, which is procuring the right materials, which are not wasteful for the environment. So they have to go and search what kind of raw materials. In fact, like Ann Wood said, the TS Designs company is contemplating hemp fiber as an alternative for cotton. But that's a long way off because hemp not only is a little coarse, so we have to deal with a coarser material, but the good news is hemp uses a lot more less water than cotton. Cotton uses a lot of water, so hemp is better. But the price of hemp per pound is $5, and the price of cotton is 75 cents to the pound. So how are we going to reconcile these differences is an issue. And then, of course, they have this concern for the people, because in a conventional business, you are looking at product, process, profit. The people aspect does not come. In fact, from an economic standpoint, in fact, I see on the web link here that my good friend Stephen Holland from the economics department is here. So from an economic standpoint, just produce the right product, which you'll sell in the marketplace and you'll make profit. But on the other hand, what about the people? And what kinds of people are we employing? And what are their benefits? And how do we take care of them? And certainly companies like TS Designs are going all the way back to the farmer. And how do they live? What are their conditions? How are they growing the cotton? And how is it being transported? And finally, like Ann said, price. And what I noticed is, in fact, we are extending the study with TS Designs, is we are looking at not just the 3 Ps, but there are also the 3 Ts, which are like in a t-shirt, which is transportation, reducing the transportation distance from the grower of cotton to finally the consumer of the apparel. And they want to reduce it to 500 miles at the most. Then there is also the transparency, like Ann showed, by putting the label that you know where it is produced, how it is produced, and so on and so forth. And then lastly, trust in the system. In fact, Ann, Jin, and I, we are odd birds to have come together. This is funny, but that's the truth. Ann is from North Carolina. She's from Concord, North Carolina. In fact, cotton is grown in New London, North Carolina, very close to where Ann is. And Jin is all the way, we imported her from China. And of course, I am the crazy person all the way who has come from India, lost his way, and here I am in the US. But one thing is true about me. I'm one of those rare birds who has visited each and every single county of North Carolina. And I have gone where cotton is grown in Hertford County, in Gates County, and how it is harvested. So it's interesting. One of the things people who are interested in sustainability should be doing is visiting different parts of our own state, seeing where what is being done. I think I've said my piece here, and Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. We formally end our presentation.
I just
Thank you,
wanted to
Sean.
add,
Thank you, Etsko.
I wanted to add, because you mentioned hemp, that there is also a production facility right in Concord that makes hemp fabrics. And I've been trying to get them to come and speak, but they're just starting. They've only been in business 3 years. And it's very exciting that this hemp fabric is starting to happen right here in North Carolina.
Thank you for that information, Ann.
Thank you, Vidya, Jin, and Ann. We definitely appreciate it. Jin, if you want to stop sharing your slides, we can have a Q&A. Feel free to turn on your cameras. You can unmute yourselves now if you have any questions. We didn't get any in the chat during the presentation, but I know there was a lot of information there, and I hope a lot of people do have some questions. Joshua?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Coming in loud and clear.
Okay, so given that the sustainable entrepreneurs are looking more so at the circle of life when it comes to clothing and what happens from start to finish and how those clothing pieces aren't easily disposed, my question is, so in this market where consumers are having less of an attention span, less of a dedication to appliances and materials and clothing, can there be such a thing as fast, sustainable fashion?
Jin and Ann, you can take that, and if I can round it up with my own comment.
So I would have to answer no to that question because, well, first of all, I wrote my thesis on the motivations and decision-making of sustainable apparel entrepreneurs. And one of the things that they were very passionate about was slow fashion and how things needed to be made carefully, with care, with love, in fact. And so I think one of what comes to mind is the designer Alabama Chainin. I don't know if you're familiar with her work, but she's won CFDA awards, and she's actually been in business for over 20 years down in Alabama. And she specifically says, I want to make my clothes with love and care and craft. And so to me, you know, just from what I've experienced, trying to hurry it up is not part of that process. I mean, I think you can be efficient, and I think that is really important. There are cut and sew facilities here in North Carolina that do a great job, but they are careful and curated, I guess is the best way to describe that, versus what I would consider fast. Jen, what do you think?
Yes, I agree with Professor Wood. And actually, all of our 5 interviews, they emphasized that they focus on quality. And we actually, the research team, we actually explored other, their websites, their online retail websites, their official company websites, and also there are some blogs related to those 5 companies. We find there is agreement. All the sustainable apparel entrepreneurs, they focus more on quality. So, and especially there is one entrepreneur repeatedly telling us their product and classic style, and they charge higher price, classic style. You can wear their products for several generations. So I think slow fashion, I agree with Professor Wood, and slow fashion is an effective way to solve these sustainability issues really in the fashion industry, because in the fashion industry, it seems like sustainability, fashion conflicts each other. However, we need to educate consumers not too crazy about fast fashion. How about you emphasize quality, slow fashion instead? And all the 5 small business apparel owners, their style actually it's a simple, clean, classic. They all have this type of style.
But it doesn't mean you can't make money. I mean, I think that's I want to clarify that fashion, that sustainable fashion doesn't mean you're not making any profit, because there is a profit to be made. It's just the quantity is not as high. It's more curated, smaller quantity, but you are making money still. So I guess a good example would be Old Mason Jar. That's one of our companies that we talk to, OMJ. They're on Instagram, and they have a boutique in Charlotte, and they are, I would say, carefully curated menswear. So they do sell. I mean, you can walk in and buy something, but they only have small releases. They do custom made suits. So they're very, and their t-shirts are from TS Designs. So they're very carefully curated. So I would consider them slow fashion, but they're still in business to make profit.
Yeah, and another thing I want to add that they actually fit the current fashion trends, because the current fashion trends are simple, clean, and minimal. So they actually match the current fashion trends very well.
Thank you. We do have a question from Rebecca in the chat. With sustainability becoming more important to more consumers, does it put pressure on larger companies to produce sustainable products?
I think it does. We've seen this. For example, H&M has a very large sustainability arm that they're producing more and more collections in a sustainable manner. Now, I don't know how they define sustainable. That's the only thing, but they do, say that they have organic fabrics and that kind of thing. So there are a lot of larger companies who are getting on the bus, so to speak. And then there are other companies that I would like to see more B Corps. For example, Eileen Fisher is a large company, but they are a certified B Corp, which is a big deal in the apparel industry. And there are more and more companies moving in that direction. Another good example of that in the manufacturing area is Levi's. They are trying to minimize their use of water in their jean manufacturing, and they've done a lot for sustainability. And of course, the granddaddy, Patagonia, is really a very inspirational company for many others as well.
Yes, and apparel companies, especially fashion companies, they can have a lot of options to do. As some companies, they focus on one aspect, and the other company, they focus on another aspect. So it's a long-term effort. Yeah.
I teach a course on operations for competitive advantage. From that perspective, large and small businesses respond to customers. And if we as customers demand something, they will listen. Right from the time of Henry Ford, they have been listening. So it is up to us as consumers to appropriately make them move in that direction. And they will listen. And I've been talking to companies like Syngenta, like Contour here in town. And they are trying to change not only on the consumption of water resources, but also on the global footprint of carbon emissions. That's the interesting question. What will be the large companies doing? They will follow where the money is. And if on the other hand, we say, this is what we need in an intangible manner, they will do exactly what we want.
The other thing we're seeing is so many companies now, apparel companies in particular, adding sustainability officers to their rosters, which, 10 years ago, it didn't exist except maybe at Patagonia and a few companies. But Vans has a big department in sustainability. I had an intern there 2 summers ago. So there's a lot of interest in the larger organizations with making sure that they are being responsible in a sustainable manner as much as possible, or at least starting to think about it.
Professor Welsh, I see you've made some comments in the chat. Did you want to unmute and plug your conference that's coming up, or?
Oh, sure, Sean. Hi, everybody. We've been funded. It was originally under the Women's Bicentennial that we had to cancel for last fall because of COVID, but it's scheduled. We're scheduling it, rescheduling it along with the university programs for this fall, and it's going to probably be in September, October one-day conference, and it's called She Can, We Can Be an Entrepreneur Everywhere. And I'd like to invite the researchers. This is a very interesting study, and I think it would be really neat to have a panel of the people in your study, if they're in the area, which most of them are, it sounds like, to come in and do a panel on sustainable textile design, because they're entrepreneurs, and that would be very interesting. And maybe you guys, all of you, could be co-hosts of the panel or something like that, but we'd be really interested in having that. And I think the textile industry is a major component of sustainability and has a long history here. I think that would be very interesting. So I'd like to invite you to do that. Just contact me if you're interested. And I do have some funding from the university, minor funding, but I do have some funding for panelists. The other thing is that I was wondering, are you seeing that there is a difference in the age of the consumers that are buying sustainable clothing? Are they in younger versus older consumers, or have you studied anything about that? Are you seeing any difference in the consumer demographics?
Thank you, Professor Welch, for your question. And that's an interesting question. And we did some studies about the millennial generation, about their attitude and behavior towards sustainable apparel. And also we reviewed some literatures. It shows that very interesting. Millennial generations, they are pro-sustainability generation. They would like to be involved in the sustainable consumption. So they have very strong position. They have very strong attitude and intention to buy. And compared to with other generation, there is a study actually did by the McKinsey, and they surveyed different generations. The millennial generation, they are more willing to buy the sustainable apparel. However, baby boomer generation, only around 10% consumers, they are willing to pay higher price for sustainable products. I guess because different generations, their sustainability knowledge level at different, and also currently the trend, sustainability is a trend, not only in the apparel industry, but also in other aspects of societal. So that's an interesting insights.
Also, two of the 5 companies that we interviewed are owned by millennials. So these are people that are, you know, not that far out of college. So that's exciting, because there's a younger generation that is pushing this movement forward. Yes,
and we also found among these 5 entrepreneurs, only 2 of them, they took some apparel classes, and the 3 entrepreneurs, they actually, they are not the fashion students. However, they feel like they can utilize apparel business as a way to solve the environmental and social issues. And they feel like this is a great opportunity. Of course, they love the apparel product, but they are more interested in using the apparel business as a way to educate consumers, to promote the sustainability. And so that's interesting. And for the 2 female entrepreneurs, they have some level of the interaction with apparel business. They are more likely the fashion trend side.
Thanks. I do want to point out that Dr. Sarah Proskowitz mentioned that today's the 110th anniversary of the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory. You can see more about that in her comment in the chat. So yeah, these issues are always coming up. And then Dr. Kanafuchi asked about pricing challenges, and that was something that was on my mind as well, because we're talking about what the younger millennial Gen Z generations care about, but what can they afford? Because we, as you mentioned, that sustainable products are more costly. And while I know that your study mostly focused on entrepreneurship and starting businesses, I'm wondering if you have done any research about second-hand businesses. So instead of just starting a brand new apparel company, but looking at stores like Goodwill, Buffalo Exchange. I can't remember the name of the one that's just up on Battleground. It's slipping my mind right now, but that sells clothes secondhand because we talked about the life and the generations of clothing that Jin had mentioned, and those are definitely more affordable than, say, buying a brand new Patagonia raincoat or something.
I'll take that first, and the others will chime in later. One thing with regard to the apparel and textile business, while it is high on water consumption, it is also high because in sustainability, you have reduce, reuse, and recycling. And what we found is the textile and apparel industry is high, one of the highest in recycling. Even though we are not able to reduce the consumption of water and things like that, but in terms of recycling of apparel, they are pretty good. So that's my comment. Maybe the others have something else to say.
Well, this is anecdotal, but my students, the other day, we went to the Bargain Box, which is a junior league thrift store where we do a visual merchandising challenge. And I learned a term called thrift flipping. And the students basically go to thrift stores and then they repurpose apparel and create a completely new look. So one of my students yesterday did some thrift flipping for the display. And I thought that was really interesting because this generation is very much on board with recycling and clothing swaps. I know there's a lot of research that have been done on clothing swaps, which is basically, students or young people get together and bring clothes that they no longer are excited about, but are in good condition. And they just have a swap and they get new things without actually buying and, buying more fast fashion. So that's a really important development that is pretty recent. And there is a lot of research on that.
That's good. Did you want to ask a follow-up? So you asked a question about water.
Oh yeah, I was just wondering that because I know that water is such it's a precious natural resource, and we know that the fresh water is only about 1% out of all the water on the planet, and so it is already very, very precious, and it's used for all these unsustainable practices. So I was wondering if water gets regulated more in some ways, I wonder if it helps with sustainable apparel entrepreneurship. I was just wondering.
Maybe there are others on this Zoom call, particularly I'm guessing Dr. Praskiewicz is, my guess is from the geography department, and certainly there'll be an answer from the environmental side. Earth is never going to run out of water. However, the imbalances will be quite a lot. So the water cycle will continue to function, but where we need water, we may not have water. And where we don't water, we may have too much water. So that's the issue that has to be taken care of when they talk about climate and other things. So yes, while we can try to resolve, sometimes some of these actions we are doing is like moving the deck chairs on the Titanic. We have to look at a lot more factors. That's my take on that.
And I also think my last position before I joined UNCG was at Delta Apparel, which is the second largest T-shirt manufacturer in the United States. And they had a plant up in Maiden, North Carolina, and they had a closed loop system. So they had a certain allotment of water from the city, but they had a closed loop where they could clean the water and recycle the water within the plant. So the closed loop system for water usage is also a really important, attribute of this production cycle. And I know that that's what a lot of companies like Levi's, especially because they're the largest users of water when you're producing denim with the indigo process of dyeing. So that's something to be considered, is that closed loop, trying to create that process whenever possible.
Thank you. I think maybe time for one more comment or one more question, and we'll need to wrap it up if anybody has anything else they'd like to add. Okay.
Well, if I have one, John,
Yeah.
I have actually a lot of questions. It was very exciting. It's very interesting. I was very excited to hear about the TS designs, the code that you can scan. That is fantastic. I would like to see that for like everything, because we just don't know where things come from. I wonder, do you think is there any movement to make it a standard practice in the industry?
Well, I wouldn't say standard practice, but I think that it is definitely growing. The whole idea of transparency that Dr. Gargea alluded to, that is a really big direction. So companies like Everlane, which has gotten pretty big, but they started very small, that one of their key values was transparency of their supply chain. So explaining where their products come from, why they choose where they choose. And so it's kind of shaming other companies that are not letting people know about their processes. So I think that it's a slow but evident change that we're seeing in the industry. And I find it very exciting because I think it's important to know where your products come from, so that you have respect for the whole supply chain. And maybe it'll make people more careful.
My area of interest is global supply networks. So even when I go to just get an oil change done in the Honda dealership, I go around and walk around in the parking lot looking at cars and the window stickers. And one thing I can say at SCO is this, that nowadays on the window sticker, and many of us can do this, they are not only giving where the automobile was manufactured or assembled, but it gives you where the drivetrain was produced, where the transmission has been produced, where was the port that was receiving this material. So actually you can draw the supply network of many of the parts, even for the automobile, just looking at the window sticker. So it is coming, more and more it will come to that extent. And talking about sometimes charity begins at home. I used to, when my kids were very, very young, I used to take them to the to either to Target or one of these stores. And then we used to play a little game that we would look at all the tags of the shirts and then identify Mozambique or Swaziland or wherever, and then go back and look at the map where they were. So I think more and more customers doing that will not only help understanding more geography, and surely Dr. Praskiewicz will be very happy with my comment. And that's how I learned my 8th grade geography, of knowing more and more what things came from or where it came from. And I think we have to educate people a lot more. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Gargea. Actually, in CARS department, for our freshmen, I think classes, we had an assignment to ask students to examine their wardrobe, closet, clean your closet and look through your closet and pick your favorite items and look at the label, where your garments came from, and label those places in a world map. So that's a way a student can learn where my clothes came from.
And one thing I can say, this is not a fast fashion, because this is almost 25 years old.
Thank you all so much. Many thanks to our guest speakers, my co-host, and we'll see you next time.